All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Dominic Rovano from Janover. I'm a partner here at the firm, and this morning we are going to be presenting a topic to you that I think is very timely, considering the environment that we're all currently working in. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity challenges in a remote worker world, and we are lucky to have Gary Stein with us. Gary is the president and owner of Netlink Systems. They are a IT consulting firm here in the New York City area. Gary works with Janover, and we partner together in providing IT and cybersecurity solutions to our clients. Gary's going to be talking about a lot of the important topics that are coming up when we have people working remotely. This pandemic has been a strain on all of our organizations. Those of us who are lucky enough to have our workers dispersed to keep our operations going face challenges. And one of those challenges that we may not focus on enough is the cybersecurity and the issues that can pop up when you have your workers outside of your environment, under your roof, if you will. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and he'll kick us off. Gary, I'm going to advance the slides for you, so just let me know when you want, if I'm behind you at all.
Thank you. And I assume you can hear me clearly?
I can hear you're good.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for Janover and Dominic for giving me the opportunity to speak today. For those who don't know me, there's a little quick bio about me. As Dominic said, we can skip to the next slide. But I'm the owner and president of Netlink Systems, providing IT support for about 26 years since I started the company, servicing small, medium-sized businesses throughout the New York area. Actually, the next slide goes into it a little bit more. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one. It's just the way since you're presenting, I have to view it on two different screens here. Anyway, here's a little bit about what we do, who we are. We don't specialize in any particular area or industry. We service a lot of different clients throughout the New York metro area. Generally, the majority of our clients do not have any internal IT support, and we handle everything for them. But of course, we have larger clients such as Janover and other firms as well that do have an internal IT department, and will handle projects or maybe provide additional staffing, do more of the heavy lifting is what I would say when it comes to servers and the more sophisticated aspects of their network, and their internal team handling more day-to-day user support, desktop support, and so on. So we handle pretty much anything that an IT department would do for a company on an outsourced basis: remote support, on-site support, projects, selling, installing equipment, and so on. Next slide, please. So just to start off here, my presentation is more or less broken down into 4 sections. The first section is going to be what we see here on this slide, the current threat landscape. I'm going to talk about who's hacking, why they're hacking, what the cost is to you, and how they're getting into your systems. The next section going to go into the remote working, obviously since the pandemic, how that affects you, what the risks are, the benefits, the challenges. Then we'll talk about something called social engineering and the human firewall, which we'll get into and I'll explain a little bit later. Then I will go and what's happening with the presentation on your side there. Talk about some cybersecurity regulations that everyone should be aware of, no matter who you are or what business you're in. I'm sorry, Dominic, you're on the wrong. Whoever's doing the slides, yeah, go back, please. One more. I haven't yet. No, back one more. Yeah, just stay right there for a moment. I'm going to go into some cybersecurity regulations, and then we'll go into Q&A and end it from there. How much time do I have, Dominic? What should I be looking to end this around?
We're gonna shoot to end around 10 to 10 to allow for some questions. Yeah.
I'll keep an eye on the clock, and I'll adjust the pace as needed. I'll probably spend more time on some things and breeze through some others that people might just start getting bored if I talk about it. But anyway, so next slide, please. So this is really the why. Why is this happening? Why do hackers hack? I mean, for the most part, it's all about money. Hackers are hacking to make money. It's extremely profitable. You can see by this slide, Cybercrime predicted by 2021 to be 6 trillion in damages annually, up from 3 trillion in 2015. I mean, it's just ridiculous the size and scope of the money that's being made, the damage that's being done by cybercrime. I mean, just to put it into perspective, it's more profitable than the entire combined global trade for all illicit drugs combined. This is being done primarily by organized crime. A lot of it is state sponsored. Certain countries coming out of Iran, China, North Korea, Russia, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, people in those places doing it, very often state sponsored, which means the government is paying these people. They have organizations just looking to hack and extort money. And for the most part, these people can't be sued. They're outside the judicial reach of the United States. They can't be extradited or prosecuted. So there's really not a lot of risk on these people. They could do it from the confines of their bedroom, from their basement, from around the world, and basically hold you hostage, stick you up and do it from, thousands of miles away anonymously. Besides that, I mean, there are other types of hackers that are out there besides ones that are doing it for profit. There are people called hacktivists, just to make you aware. They might do hacking for political or social change, looking to disrupt services or governments or organizations. Maybe it could be people who are against, let's say PETA, or against the ethical treatment of animals, and they're going to go and hack or affect companies that they don't agree with. And of course, there's just straight terrorism. Hacking can also be done by terrorists to disrupt governments, electrical grids, water supplies, and so on. Next slide, please. So why the internet? I mean, it's pretty obvious here, just the sheer size. It's just such a large environment. The amount of people and devices and systems and businesses that you can touch remotely because they're all interconnected. As you can see here, this just illustrates the growth of the internet from 15 to 18 and projected into 2022. It's going to be a 50% growth in users, 6 billion in 2022, 33 billion devices. It's staggering. I mean, it's almost impossible to understand, just the size and scope of that and the growth here. There are just so many devices on the internet. We're talking about everything you buy these days gets connected to the internet. Everybody in your homes, you have probably more devices on the internet than you even realize. But besides the phones and the computers, Alexa, Google Assistants, you have toasters and refrigerators and coffee makers that connect to the internet. You might have Ring cameras, a device for feeding your dog remotely, things like that. You just don't realize the number of devices on the internet, and every one of these things is susceptible to hacking. We can go on to the next slide. So, who, again, I touched a little bit on the who and the why, but, as far as, who's a target here? And the answer is everyone. I very often hear people say, I'm just a small business. It's just 5 of us here in whatever, in Rockville Center. Why would I be a target? The thing is that the people who are doing the hacking, the criminals, they don't know who you are. They don't know who's on the other side of that firewall. When they're knocking, they just look at the internet. It's just a whole bunch of doors, and they're knocking on doors, and they're turning doorknobs and trying different keys to get in. They don't know what's on the other side. It could be a 5-person company, it could be your house, or it could be a bank. There's no way to know. And once they're in, they're just going to deploy their tools and do whatever they can to make money from you. And a big part of it has to do with stealing and selling information. That's basically where they're making their money. They steal information, they sell it on the dark web, and another big part of it is something called ransomware, which you may or may not be aware of. You've probably heard the term, but ransomware is where they attack your system, they encrypt all the data, and they hold it hostage, and they extort money from you. Just as an example here, you see, credit cards, verified credit cards sell for $1 on the open internet, on the dark web, hundreds of dollars for patient records, because they take this information, they could steal your identity, they could open up bank accounts. They could open up credit cards. They could use it to do identity theft. It's just what they can do with this stuff. I mean, if you've ever had your identity stolen or you know people who have, it's an absolute nightmare. And clearly, people here that are doing this couldn't care less. They're just doing it strictly for the money. We can move on to the next slide. So as far as the cost, so that was the why they're doing it. What is the cost to you? And that's something you really need to understand. I mean, I hear people say, oh, the stuff on my system, it really doesn't matter if I lose it. Maybe a personal thing, oh, I have it backed up. But your backup may not even be protected. But just to give you an idea here, what are the costs to you? There's a statistic, they say that 60% of companies that have a breach do not fully recover from the breach and fail within 6 months. I mean, it's a pretty staggering statistic to consider. And everybody thinks it's not going to happen to me, but I mean, not again, I'm not looking to scare people here, but it happens to more people than you would even know or think. And it's a question of how deep the breach is, of course. But when it comes to sorry, just looking here. So what the cost of a breach is here, and I have the bullet points here. I'm not going to read through them. There are a lot of different costs. People think of, what's the cost of my data, but you got to think about what's the cost to your business if your business was down for 3 days a week, a couple of weeks. Could your business survive that? Would your clients hang in there for you? What is, you could see here, stolen money, lost productivity, the business disruption, the cost of the investigation. Do you have cyber insurance? That's something I'd like to bring up here, is the cost of a breach or the cost of a hack if you're running a business can be staggering. Just the notification cost, depending on how much information you have and what was stolen, notifying clients, people of the breach, paying a ransom, the cost to restore. There's also possible, very often there's wire fraud that happens through hacking, where people send money mistakenly to or wire money to the wrong account. Anyway, so there's cyber insurance that will cover a lot of these costs that I have listed here. There's also fraud insurance that you could get that could help with covering wire frauds and things like that. It's certainly something I suggest that anyone with a business should certainly look into this. It's very, very important because the cost of cyber insurance is fairly inexpensive and the benefits are huge. Next slide, please. So now here, I'm just going to talk about 4 recent attacks, different types of hacks, just to explain to you, just to give you a perspective here on, you hear about hacks, you hear about, Home Depot got hacked or Target or this or that, but to really understand what the cost is. So in July, just this past July, Garmin was hacked. It was a ransomware attack, which means that, their computers were rendered useless. The data on them and was completely encrypted. They couldn't get to it. The computers couldn't boot. Their GPS services, their website, customer service systems were down for days. It was hacked by a group overseas who they were trying to negotiate with. They paid an enormous ransom of $10 million. And now it turns out that the group that they paid the ransom to was under US trade sanctions because it's considered a terrorist organization. And the US government, believe it or not, is now considering prosecution of the people at Garmin for paying a ransom to a terrorist organization that was placed under US trade sanctions, which is interesting. I'm not sure where that's going to go. The next one is Tesla. You think of Tesla, a very sophisticated technology based company run by Elon Musk, but they again, this was an attempted hack, and it's an example of how it could take a different just a different way for a hack. Instead of it being done electronically, what happened here was a Tesla employee was approached by someone that they had met who was offered a bribe for them to install some malware onto Tesla's network with the idea of encrypting, ransoming data, and getting money out of Tesla. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be electronic, somebody anonymously from the internet getting into your system. It could be just someone offering an employee, a disgruntled employee, money to do something. And in this case, Tesla could have the most secure network in the world, but once someone on the inside has access, if that person installs something, malware or whatever it is that this person from Russia wanted them to do, it would have given these hackers access to the Tesla network and thereby given them the potential to get a lot of money out of Tesla or at least affect Tesla's ability to operate. Next slide, please. Here's another perfect example here. You think of sophisticated companies, so Cisco. 2 years ago, Cisco had a situation where an ex-employee, 5 months after he had been released from Cisco or left Cisco, I don't know if he was fired or he left on his own, still had access into Cisco's systems. He still had access into their back-end servers and all that. So it was just an example where Cisco did not have proper procedures in place when an employee left, whether, disabling accounts, account access, and so on. This guy left. 5 months later, he connected into their system and deleted 456 virtual machines. And what does that mean? Basically, the Cisco WebEx system, their online system, which is like Teams or Zoom, was completely down. Millions of dollars in lost revenue, millions of dollars in refunds to customers. And this was something that was completely avoidable. All they had to do was just disable his account when he left.
Yeah, Gary, that's a good point. I mean, we have so many touch points and our employees, there's so many different connections that we have. It's really, you got to stay on top of turning everyone's account off when you're parting ways with people. This is, it's just becoming there's more and more ways for people to access your information these days.
Sure, and I would say it's even more so. And again, no excuse for Cisco I'm sure a very extensive internal IT support department, but I'll tell you, us as an IT support provider, our clients, all the time we hear it from a client, well, we're going to do a project and we do maybe a little bit of an audit on their system. Here's the list of users on your system. Let's just make sure we have the right number of users or mailboxes that we're going to migrate or whatever the project happens to be. And they'll tell us, that person's not here anymore. That person's not here anymore. This person doesn't work for us anymore. And there was no communication from them to us. They fired a person, they did their exit interview or whatever they do. They paid them their severance, whatever it happened to be. They never told us to disable their account. They never told us to maybe change the password or forward the email or do something like that. They're just open holes, open doors into their network.
Right. And it becomes even more pronounced when you are remote like this. You don't see the person that's sitting at their desk anymore. People may see an account still active, and communication is key. So
right, a great example. Just companies that don't have good controls, right? This environment right now with COVID, remote working, and all that, maybe the lack of controls, it's even worse. And then the last one is just a simple example of a client of ours that got hacked. It was a number of years ago. It was actually pretty timely that I'm talking about it right now on November 19th. So this attack happened on the Wednesday night of Thanksgiving week. It was 4 years ago. This client of ours was hacked. It happened. Why'd they do it on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving? Because it gave them a couple of days to do damage before it was really noticed. We got a call on Thanksgiving, something odd was happening, just one of those things. And it turned out that this hacker got in through this client had a web portal for construction software they have. And again, I'm pushing blame. I don't want to take, we weren't responsible for it. It was another company was responsible for this product. It was an open door to the internet. It was something that wasn't maintained. It wasn't patched. It had vulnerabilities, which meant that when you hear that it has a vulnerability, what that means is every piece of software has vulnerabilities. There are always different things that are being discovered. Like Windows has 10 whatever millions of lines of code. You can't have it can't be error free. So there are these vulnerabilities, but they get discovered. they could get discovered by the manufacturer. They could get discovered by third parties. Very often, a third party might notice that there's a vulnerability in a software which allows unauthorized access or a way to do something to get what they call privileged access, which means give a user who has lower access higher access, or something called remote code execution, which allows a remote user to run something remotely on the system, which could cause damage or give them access. In this case, this system, which allowed users to remotely access the construction software, had vulnerabilities that were never patched and allowed this hacker to get in. This hacker probably was aware of this vulnerability. It was Oracle software, and they just go knock on doors looking for a system that's running this version of Oracle that hasn't been patched. As soon as they find it, they know exactly how they can get in. You can buy tools on the internet very, very, very inexpensively that give you the keys to get into those systems. So, in this case, just you can stay on that slide, that's fine. But in this case, our client was down for about a week and a half for us to get their systems restored. On our side, it wasn't a tremendous amount of money, but it still cost them a lot of money. It was $25,000 in our labor over the course of a week and a half to restore their systems. They paid an $8,000 Bitcoin ransom. I had to go with them to a bodega in Astoria to buy Bitcoin with $100 bills. I mean, you can imagine how long it took. I mean, just the process, it was really embarrassing and, very uncomfortable, as you can imagine. Um, so again, talking about how they're getting in, I was just talking about vulnerabilities, but a big part of the way people get into systems, they say 90% of breaches come from emails. Everybody sees it all the time. You get an email, it looks suspicious, you're not sure. They're called phishing emails. They're just phishing. They send stuff out there hoping that you're going to click. Now, if you have a good spam filtering software or something in place, blocks it. But our clients are always complaining about our spam filtering software. Oh, it's blocking things that I need. It's false positives, but you can't block the bad stuff without sometimes blocking the good stuff, unfortunately. And the thing I would say to everybody here, and what you need to understand is that security is not convenient. And again, I probably should have said that at the very beginning. It's something I try to tell clients all the time. Security is not convenient. You just got to put that in your head. If you want to have a secure system, it's going to take away some of the conveniences of that you're used to. It might mean having, more complicated passwords, multi-factor authentication, having to use VPNs, having to have software that blocks things and doesn't allow you to do certain things. Unfortunately, that's just what you have to live with. So on the phishing side, there's a lot of different types of phishing attacks. I don't think I'm going to bother going into all the different ones, but just to give you an idea, there are phishing attacks, and actually, I have next slide shows some of the examples. But what a phishing attack does is you get an email that appears to be from someone that it isn't, or it is from someone who it appears to be, and you click on a link, it takes you to a site. You might accidentally present your credentials to them. You click on something and it prompts you to put in let's say your username and password. It brings you to a site that appears to be Google, Gmail, or Google Docs, or maybe Office 365, or maybe your bank, or maybe a familiar website like Amazon or something. And you think you're logging into that site, but in actuality, you're logging into a phony site that looks just like that site. And what happens is they steal your credentials because you put in your username and your password. It doesn't work. You try it again. You try it a third time. You're like, what's going on? So
And Gary, I'm glad you included the IRS example here.
okay,
It's really important. We always tell our clients the IRS is not going to email you. They're not going to call you. They're going to send you a letter. And we see people, unfortunately, falling for emails like this. And no one wants to get communication from the IRS, but keep in mind, it's only going to come through the mail.
right. Yeah, I mean that's an example. I mean it's also it's not only by email. These things also come by phone call. I'm sure
Right.
everybody gets a lot of those phone calls. Phone calls are called vishing instead of phishing with a P, which is a V because it's a voice phishing. That's exactly what they're doing. You reach out to someone, an elderly. Listen, it doesn't have to be an elderly person. That's not even right for me to say that. It could happen to just about anybody. Get a call. They say it's the IRS. Your account's frozen. Your social security number has been locked, or whatever it is, and next thing you know, you're telling them your social security number. They trick you into giving you all this information, and we're going to talk about that later. It's called social engineering. But What happens here is, and again, these are different examples of different types of phishing. Fake email address. It looks like the email, but it isn't. You hover over it. The site looks like the site, but it isn't. Very often, how do they get you to do these things? It's they put maybe a sense of urgency. Your account is locked. There's a billing problem. There's an expired credit card. And very often, a lot of these things, you'll see it and you'll say, oh, this is BS, and you delete it and you move on. But I'll tell you, you'd be surprised at how often it is you could get tricked, because you might have just placed an Amazon order. Just coincidentally, 10 minutes later, you get an email saying your Amazon order, couldn't go through. Just a random thing, doesn't give any specifics. And you end up clicking on the link in that email and brings you to a fake website that looks like Amazon. What I would say is, some advice I would give to everybody is, if you get any email from anybody saying that there's a problem with your account, there's something that has to be addressed, never, ever, ever click on the link that's in the email. Go to your bank's website directly with your browser. If you have a shortcut, or you have a favorite saved for it, that's how you should log into your bank. Log into Amazon by typing in Amazon.com in your browser. Don't follow that link. And then you'll see, and you can verify if your account is really locked, if your order didn't go through, if your credit card is expired.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these can throw you off. I mean, if your house is like mine, you're placing 2, 3 Amazon orders a day, or you're always expecting a shipment. So when you get something from FedEx saying your shipment, or UPS or DHL, it's not completely unexpected, especially in the environment we're in right now.
Yeah, and listen, these are just some examples. There's another type of an email. It's called sextortion. So this happens quite often. It's very embarrassing. I've had clients reach out to me and they're kind of embarrassed to even share it. You get an email that says something like, I know your password is whatever, ABC123, and that you've been watching porn, and we have images of you and a history of the websites you've been on and things like that. And whatever, if the person happened to have watched some porn, or whatever it was, or did something that they're questioning, they think that this person really has this information. And it's extortion. So what they do is they ask you to pay them a certain amount of money, and they won't release that information out to the public. They're not going to share it with your wife or your husband, or your coworkers. But in reality, it's completely BS. What they've done is they're sharing with you information that you know. So they'll say, like, your password is ABC123, and that happens to be your password, or happens to be a password that you've used in the past. And most likely, what's happened here is there's so many sites that have been hacked all around the world. Like I said earlier, Home Depot, Target, and so on. And if you had that password on that site, what happened was Target gets hacked, usernames and passwords get downloaded to the dark web, somebody buys them, and we're all guilty of using the same password over and over again in multiple places. So when you see that password, unless very few people use a unique password for every site, or you're using a password manager and really have that down to a pat, it's very likely that that password is going to be something that is familiar to you. But what I say is, rest assured is, somebody says, you're really not that sexy, or if there are different types of ones, you, you get the come on about winning $1 million, the Nigerian prince, all these different things. They're just all come ons, and
Right,
they're
right,
all just
right,
total BS.
right.
So the
All
next
right.
slide.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
mean,
you have
now
something to
I
add?
was going to say, now that we've scared everyone, let's, if you want to, we can skip to remote working and the benefits and the risks there, and we'll talk about the human firewall.
Sure, sure, sure. I've already jumped on the other stuff, but just to tell you, just real quick on it. Okay, yeah, let me jump ahead to that slide on my side. So remote working, there are benefits and there are risks and issues with remote working. I think we've all seen it. We we had a lot of clients scrambling in March to get people set up working remotely from home. We found that a lot of our clients, and I'm sure a lot of you, I mean, Janover is a little bit of a different story. Janover was very well set up for people to work remotely, employees with laptops and so on, because it's a lot of work is done remotely. But for any clients that are on the call right now, we have lots of clients that had employees who worked from their office. There was never an intention of having them to work from home. I could even tell you myself. I mean, we had remote working ability. Our guys could always work remotely from home, but we never sanctioned it or said, yeah, you could work from home this week or not. Um, but we had to scramble to get clients with just regular office workers to work from home, receptionists answering phone calls from home, routing calls, just doing very, very basic work. It was a bit of a scramble. Um, but a lot of clients have seen the benefits, and a lot of conversations I've had with clients have told me that it's worked surprisingly well, and they're pretty happy with how it's worked out. Um, and employees, and I've even my own employees have enjoyed the the reduced, like I have here, reduced interruptions by coworkers, reduced it's cheaper for a company, spending more time with the family. But all these things bring additional risks as well. And having the ability for people to work from home, I mean, the very, very first point there is increase employee retention and productivity. I mean, certainly employees are happy with it. However, we move on to the next slide, we'll start talking about the risks here. Big risks, very top one there. Added distractions, new and added distractions. Anyone who's been working from home, sharing your house with kids, spouses, and so on. I mean, the distractions are just endless. I think a lot of us maybe have underestimated or not even considered the distractions that employees or other people have. Maybe you just think about yourself, and maybe you have a good home office or a good quiet place to work, or maybe you live on your own. But if you have an employee who has roommates or has maybe an elderly parents living with them or children doing remote learning, the amount of distractions and things going on just brings another level of risk to your business and to your IT infrastructure, because it, by having these distractions, what we were talking about earlier, the phishing emails, someone may not be so vigilant when these things come in because of all the different things that are happening around them. It's perfectly suited for a social engineering or a phishing attack, or one of those phone calls while they have a baby on their lap, they're trying to feed their kids, whatever is going on over there. You know, it's more difficult to manage your people. I mean, we have the problem here. How do you know what people are doing? I've had clients ask me, can we track what people are doing? How long they're on their computers? They're questioning maybe the productivity of some of the employees. Certainly, it's not an easy thing to track, not an easy thing to know. What are people accessing? Where are they accessing it from? Are they working from home? Are they sitting in a Starbucks? Are they sitting in a park someplace? Are they using public Wi-Fi? I don't know. Do you know? You probably don't know. Those are all risks. Home networks. Let's say, just say the one point there: personal devices not managed by IT. A lot of clients had employees using personal home computers, which are not managed by the IT department. They may not be clean computers. We say, the IT department does not control the hygiene of the computer, which means it may not be patched or updated. It doesn't, it's susceptible, it has vulnerabilities that haven't been addressed. They're, that they haven't installed Windows updates, or maybe Adobe, Microsoft Office hasn't been up. Maybe they don't have antivirus software, just very, very basic stuff. How do you know they're using a clean device? It's a risk. Or home network's not set up to handle traffic. So what does that mean? What that means is that you're at home, you have a home network, you have Wi-Fi, you typically use it at night, your phone is connected to it, you're watching a movie, you're streaming something, but these networks are not necessarily set up to have husband, wife, kids, remote learning, kids on Xbox, you're trying to do a Zoom meeting, you connect to the meeting, your connection's unstable, your voice is garbling and going in and out, the video is glitchy, it's just, from a quality standpoint, clearly that's a problem. Again, it's just risks and issues. That's not necessarily a vulnerability, but it's issues that people run into. Home routers and Wi-Fi. I'll just tell you, people. I'll just finish it from the last slide, but it's okay. You could be on that slide right now. But everyone has Wi-Fi in their house. They whether it's devices, they went to Staples and bought some wireless device, or your Wi-Fi is being provided by FiOS or by Optimum or by Spectrum or whoever, but you don't have Wi-Fi on the other side of your house. So you buy some Wi-Fi extenders or boosters or some equipment you bought at Costco or at Staples or wherever, and you plug it in. Did you change the password? Is it using just the default password that it came out of the box? Um, do you have, do other people know the password? Is the traffic secure? If people are accessing your corporate network and the traffic is mixing with other things in the network, is there a guarantee that that bad traffic is not getting to your office? Who knows? I mean, it would have to be investigated. Again, just bringing up issues here, things to think about. On the next slide, it's just additional risks and issues. We have clients, they try to do things remotely, but maybe they need a wired connection. We have clients that trying to do remote check scanning, remote deposit, or they need a scanner connected that has to scan remotely to a server in their office. A lot of people have wireless connections, but maybe a lack of wired connections at home. Again, IoT is Internet of Things. That's what I mentioned earlier, having to do with toasters, coffee makers, all these other devices that you have connected to your network that are not managed, that are possibly insecure, that are possibly vulnerable because they haven't been patched, they haven't been updated. Um, Other issues, again, I mentioned the Wi-Fi thing. Public Wi-Fi is certainly an issue. A lot of people don't realize when you're on public Wi-Fi that other people can see your traffic. They could see, they could very easily sniff the information that you're sending. If there's a sophisticated hacker out there, and again, it does happen. It doesn't happen very often, but certainly, if it can happen once, you should consider it can happen anytime. But you should use a VPN or even sitting with your laptop, whatever. I know Starbucks generally they're not, you can't sit there, but just in general, if you could today sit there, how many people, someone looking over your shoulder? I'm sure you've been in a place and someone's got a computer open and maybe you're looking over their shoulder. There's something on the screen that looks interesting, whatever it is. People could be looking at your screen, seeing a password you're typing in, seeing, and writing it down, seeing personal or private information that shouldn't be shared with others that might be on your screen, leaving your computer sitting on the table in Starbucks while you go to the bathroom and not locking it. Things like that, things you really, really need to consider and think about. These are all risks. Online meetings, we've all had those struggles, being forced to use Zoom and Teams and so on, but people not being trained properly, people, Zoom bombing, which Zoom is now addressing a little bit in a better way, but having credentials out on the internet and random people jumping into a meeting. Again, I'm not looking to scare everybody, but just making you aware. Just you should be aware of these things and think about it. I know the slides were provided, and I think everything was shared out. So if you want to refer back to it, certainly you can. So next slide, please. So now, again, I said the weakest link in cybersecurity is the human factor, and again, it is a very weak link because essentially you can have an IT department spending thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to protect and to lock down and to address everything with technology. But in the end, the human, the user, the people who work for you can be the weakest link here in your cybersecurity, let's say, fabric. They're also your biggest asset if trained properly and can block things or make you aware of things. But we can move on to the next slide, please. So what it comes down to is the phishing piece and all these different things that happen. It's called social engineering. And again, I want to read this. I generally don't read slides, but the social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. So it's someone pretending to be someone else or getting that email and just tricking someone into doing it, into providing the information, sharing private information. It could be a phone call, change of wire instructions, last minute emergency to do something to, send money for a transaction. I'm jumping on an airplane. I'm unavailable. Please do it now. Um, that's all social engineering, whatever they can to get you to think it's real and to do something that you shouldn't be doing. And it happens all the time. Next slide, please. So what do you do to help with the social engineering or to protect people? We call it the human firewall, turning each person into a firewall in a sense, teaching them, training them to know about security and how to protect your data and network, following best practices, understanding what's suspicious, reporting suspicious activity. I can't tell you how often employees see something suspicious and they don't even report it because maybe they're embarrassed or they think it's going to go away. But again, it's part of training. It's a training process, and there are a lot of ways you could do this. Move on to the next slide, please.
Yeah, that's, and Gary, just to
Yeah.
jump in, this is something that we've really focused on with your help internally here at Janover, is just training our team on what to look for. You know, there's different
Right.
solutions you'll probably mention. Keep an eye out for emails you aren't expecting. And it really does it gets people to be more conscious about what's coming into their inbox. And it's been very helpful for us.
Yeah, that's the Know Before, which is a system that you guys are using. It
Mhm.
periodically sends out fake phishing emails to employees, and this is what we have clients do. And it tests people. Did they click on it? Did they delete it? Did they click open it? Did they open it and then click on the link? Did they click on the link and then provide credentials? So it's, and then those users who basically made the wrong decision, they're provided with some training materials to help them be aware. It's a very, very positive thing to teach people to, how to identify these things.
Right. You can
Yeah,
think of it as like a workout program for your human firewall. You know, you want that human
exactly.
firewall to be strong and agile. It's a workout program, and if, as everyone knows, if you don't work out for a long time, you get
Exactly.
weak.
You
And
regress,
you're right.
right?
This keeps you in shape.
But it has to be a continual testing and training, just like exactly. You go to the gym for a couple of weeks, then you stop, you go back, you regress, and you have to start all over again. There's a lot of different services out there that do this, but also other things that you could use. I have listed here. Password managers are really, really important. So you don't reuse passwords and you use unique passwords and use strong passwords. Really, really important. The best advice I could give anyone here is make sure you have multi-factor authentication enabled on every one of your accounts. I mean, most banks and most systems force it now, but on any personal system, you log in, you use a username and password, and then it texts you back a code that you have to key in, or maybe it sends you an email, you have to type that in. So, so important. Keep work on work computers, and if in doubt, shut it down. If you think something happened, don't leave the computer on and keep working. Turn off your computer, disconnect the computer, and contact IT.
Right.
Now, I'm going to have to breeze through this stuff because we only have about 7 minutes here.
Mhm.
So I'm going to talk about cybersecurity regulations. Three main ones to make people aware of, especially for the Janover people out there. And again, if there are clients connected here, you should all be aware of this as well. The very first one, next slide, please, is called the New York State Shield Act. So this was a law that was passed in July, went into effect March 21st, right in the middle of the pandemic.
Perfect timing. Right.
Perfect timing. Essentially, what New York State is trying to do is to protect personal information. So if you store any personal information on your computer network, um, names, social security numbers, birth dates, things that's not generally available, you know, online, not just very basic information, someone's name and address, but with additional information that could be used for identity theft, to do a scam or whatever. If your system gets breached, you must notify the New York State Attorney General's office. You must notify the people of the breach. That's essentially what it is. So they're looking to prevent or to protect New York State residents' data. And this affects just a couple of departments and companies, HR departments, social security numbers, birth dates, from employment applications, health insurance forms, all that kind of stuff. If it's stored electronically, you have to protect it. You are responsible for it. Real estate companies, leases, credit checks, things like that happens all the time. They get all that information. If you do credit card transactions, hopefully you're not storing the credit card numbers and dates and expirations and so on. You can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, this is, again, what I just said here. You have to notify people. If you don't notify, there's a penalty, of course. All New York State is looking to do is to collect money here. They want to tell people they're protecting you, but again, in the end, it's a way to find people. Next slide. I'm really going to run through this quickly here. There are a lot of requirements. It's fairly complicated, but essentially, You need to have someone who's going to coordinate your security. You need to protect stuff. You need to have safeguards in place to protect the data. You need to make sure that your vendors you work with are protecting data and that they don't have access to things that they shouldn't have access to. You have to have a system in place to detect a breach. You need to be able to, again, there's a lot of things here. I'm not going to go into all of these things here, but it's just a lot of IT, cybersecurity, compliance things that you need to have in place to be compliant. The good news is, if you move on to the next page, there are exemptions for small businesses. They consider a small business less than 50 employees, less than 5 million a year on assets, or 3 million in annual revenue over 3 years on average, I think it is, or something like that. It's a little vague exactly what the exemptions are and how it's worded. But what it comes down to is, if you are a small business, it's not that this doesn't apply to you. It just doesn't apply in the same way. It's very vague, and I have it there on the slide. You must implement a system with reasonable safeguards that are appropriate to the size and complexity of your business, whatever that means. So, in other words, they'll find a way to find you. You really need to protect stuff. And my best advice is, just don't store it. Don't store it on your network. Get rid of it if you don't need it. That's the most important thing. But obviously, an accounting firm, Janover, tremendous amount of
Right.
information that gets
Some
stored.
things you
Yeah,
have to store.
you
Yep.
have no choice. The next one, real quick, New York State DFS. This is a New York State Department of Financial Services. Any company that falls under their jurisdiction, and it's insurance companies, banks, credit unions, I guess companies that handle money, but also health insurers, excuse me, all fall under the jurisdiction of DFS. And it's a whole set of cybersecurity regulations, very similar to New York State New York State Shield, but it's even more so. There are some exemptions. The exemptions are much lower, less than 10 employees. They and the they have more requirements, but if you have any clients that fall under DFS, and if you're not sure, there's a link here. You can click on that link. You can look up a company name. You could download a list of all companies that are under the jurisdiction of DFS. You could see if those companies need to comply to this regulation. Some companies may not even be aware that they have to do this. And ignorance does not. You'll still be responsible to pay the fine, and you'll still be possibly prosecuted or whatever it is, licenses revoked if you don't comply, even if you're not aware that you had to comply. The next slide is called CMMC. We're seeing this a lot now coming up. We have some clients that are, they're not defense contractors, but they might manufacture or are involved in businesses that are related to contractors, defense contractors, or suppliers. It's kind of like a 6 degrees of separation. If you do business with someone who does business with someone and so on, it kind of can affect you, or you might be asked to comply to this cybersecurity maturity model. It's a very, very crazy, extremely expensive thing to implement. I've been on some calls, some webinars. Chris and I, if anyone knows Chris, my partner, it's it's very, very, very overwhelming. In fact, one thing I saw in the last webinar I was on, it was actually pretty interesting. What they said was that you need to, if someone pushes this to you and you have to um, subscribe to this model for cybersecurity for the Department of Defense, number one, look at how much revenue you're generating from the business that's requiring this. In other words, if it's a couple $100,000 in revenue and it's only a small piece of your business, you may want to actually not even do that business anymore, because they're saying the cost to comply with this can really get very, very expensive, and it may not even be worth it. So anyway, not to scare people, but it's pretty crazy what you're asked to do here. But this is and the interesting thing here, it's not for safeguarding top secret information. It's for safeguarding what they call controlled unclassified information. They call it CUI. So it's information that you get that might say it's sensitive but unclassified. It's for official use only. So again, it's interesting how they're taking it and really everybody's doing is pushing the responsibility to other people and making you protect it and be responsible. So I will, that's actually our last slide, and
It's
you
our
could,
last slide. Yeah. So
yeah.
if anyone, well, thank you, Gary. We're going to open it up for Q&A right now. If you have any questions for Gary, please chat them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll give people a few minutes. So Gary, what are some of the things that people can do, relatively quickly if we've scared anyone? What are some of the easy things that people can adopt, say, in 2 or 3 days?
I would say on a personal level is make sure you have antivirus, anti-malware software on your computer and you pay for a subscription, not some freebie thing. It's worth the price. I'm not going to recommend one over another. They're all generally good. A name brand of something. Be very careful on public Wi-Fi, which I said earlier. Be careful of your passwords. On a personal level, the multi-factor authentication is super, super important on any
Right.
account. It's annoying. Like I said, security is not convenient, and if you just keep saying that, then you can accept it. Just do that. I urge you to do that. I use LastPass myself. There's a number of them out there. I like LastPass, but there's a family thing. But I still haven't been able to get my wife to use it. So there you go.
Right. Right. All right. We don't have any questions coming in. So I guess we will
I
call
would
it
say if I just interrupt for a second, my email address is on there. Everybody, if you don't have my email address, it could be shared with you. It's on the last slide there.
yep.
If you think of a question later, tomorrow, next week, feel free to reach out to me directly. Very, very happy to respond or have a phone call. If you have a question about a client or an issue or something, more than happy to talk about it, even come on site and meet with you. No cost whatsoever, just as a courtesy and as an initial consultation.
Right, right. Yeah, and we, again, thank you for the time this morning. Something we all should take very seriously. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Gary or feel free to reach out to any of your Janover professionals that you might work with, and we'll make sure that we point you in the right direction. It's a new world we're all working in, and we're all in it together, and we want everyone's business to be as successful as possible, and cybersecurity is an important part of that. So thank you, Gary. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and we will see you at our next webinar. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.